On today's show, 4 impending free agents signed extensions with their teams and avoided some offseason drama. We're also going to preview the first round of the playoffs because they're finally here. And last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about some picks for 6th player of the year. Cal, are you ready?
So ready. Let's do it.
All right. Our headline of the week. We could have had some drama with some of the discourse in terms of impending free agents this coming offseason, but a lot of them just signed extensions with their team. So the 4 players that we're going to talk about today is Jewell, Loyd, Kahleah Copper, Betnijah, Laney, and Kayla McBride. We'll start with Jewell Loyd. She signed an extension with the Seattle Storm for 2 years through the 2025 season. The first year, per reporting from BTRL, is $241,984. And then in 2025, it will be $249,032. First of all, oh, wow. Those are crazy numbers, like in such a good way, of course. Let's look at the context for her like signing with the Seattle Storm, because there were a lot of questions kind of surrounding like, are they going to be able to keep Jewell? Is Jewell going to be the face of this team in this post-Sue Bird era? And they did it. So like, Cal, what were your kind of initial gut reactions on her signing that extension?
Well, it's so great for Seattle, obviously, because this is your cornerstone now that you lost, like you said, Stewie and Bird, and you have so many young pieces around her: Jordan Horston, Dulcie Fankin, Min Giadu, Jade Melbourne. We've talked about all these on this show before, and you're in the lottery, so you're going to add at least one more new young piece, probably a good one, this coming year. Having someone like Jewell, who's a veteran but still in her prime, around to both on the court just kind of be that leader, and also off the court mentor some of these young players as they go through some of those growing pains, I think is just huge for this franchise, and for really them sort of getting back to contention sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and you did kind of touch on that, how like she's leading the way. We got the draft lottery coming up, like the draft coming up soon this next coming year, which is going to be pretty stacked. And they didn't make the playoffs this year, kind of expected, just with the way that they have been in that rebuilding kind of state of mind. And I think like it's huge because I know there was going to be a lot of discourse, and I think like locking Jewell down is the first step in the many different things that Seattle can do in this upcoming offseason. If you do well in the draft, you can draft somebody really exciting, but then also you might be able to lure other, free agents. I know there was some talk about like Skylar Diggins-Smith potentially being somebody that Seattle could look at. I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I think, like having Jewell now it's huge for who else they can attract.
Yeah, well, I have no idea what's going on with Skylar Diggins-Smith just in general. So like, just from a purely basketball perspective, I think it would work out great. For her playing next to Jewell, and Jewell's played with a legendary point guard most of her career, so why not get back to that? Very different type of player from Sue Bird, but still just would make that backcourt completely lethal. I like what you said though. That's a great point, because if you're going to get back to contention again, like I said, sooner, Jewell and these young pieces probably aren't enough. It's enough to get back to the playoffs, but it's not really. And you're going to probably need to add another big piece, who knows? Maybe they get the number 1 pick, and maybe that piece is Caitlin Clark. But you're going to need to add at least one more star next to Jewell if you really want to get into championship conversation. And this is going to help them do that.
Yeah, especially on the front court side as well too. I think they're going to be looking for another piece because they did lose Stewie last year. So I think, or this year, I should say. I don't even know what year it is anymore. But like those are pretty big like players to lose, and like I just said, keeping Jewell Loyd was really good, because I feel like if they would have lost her, that would have been another step backward, even if you would get like a fantastic pick in the lottery, because you still need someone that's still anchoring the team. But yeah, Jewell Loyd signs extension with the Storm. Move on to the next one, because this was another player where if she hadn't signed an extension, I think there would have been a lot of questions about where she might end up. Kahleah Copper, who waited until seemingly the last second to sign that extension, because they were waiting. She had like until tip off of that last game against the Sun, where she was actually out with like a chronic toe injury. That I don't know if that was just like a reason to just sit out the last game of the season or what was going on. But she signs with Chicago also through 2 years. kind of similar numbers to Jewell Loyd, where, per reporting from Annie Costabile, she has going to have $241,984 in that first year, which is exactly the same as Jewell Loyd, and then $248,132 in year 2 through 2025. That's huge, because this entire off season and season, the topic has been, this is Ka's team now, and the front office has very much put her, at the forefront of everything. And, used to be James Wade that was kind of involved with that, but now he's just like mysteriously a Raptors assistant coach and is no longer part of the Sky front office. But it seems like they still have that goal of like keeping Ka as the main player. And I think it's huge that even with his departure, she still chose to re-sign with the Chicago Sky. I'm going to be especially interested on like who they retain on this roster after the season is over. But all in all, another thing kind of like a parallel with Jewell Loyd is keeping her there might also attract other people too. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Ka re-signing with the Sky and then also kind of like waiting till the last minute to do so?
Yeah, it is interesting that, I wonder how those negotiations went down in terms of how sort of up to the brink they got. But like you said, like the Sky, they probably are. This is going to help them bring someone in, which is something that I think they're going to need even more than the Storm, because it's like the Storm. You drew those parallels, except without the lottery pick. And some of the other pieces around her are not as young as what Jewell has around her. You're looking at the core of this team. You're talking about Courtney Williams, who's an unrestricted free agent, by the way. They may bring her back. Marina Mabry, Elizabeth Williams. These are players who are in their prime. It's not like they're aging, but these aren't really players who are going to be better in 2 or 3 years from now than they are now, the way that Seattle is. So if you're Chicago, like if you want to be relevant and you want to be anywhere remotely a winning basketball team, you have to bring Kahleah back. That was the only way to do that. You don't have another path towards improvement, I don't think, outside of maybe bringing in some of those other free agents, which, like you said, is going to be a lot more likely if they can play next to a star like Kahleah. And they got some cap room. Maybe they let Courtney Williams go and bring someone else back. Maybe Dana Evans, who is a young piece that we'll talk about a little bit later, moves into the starting lineup. So we'll see what happens. But this was like an absolutely imperative move, I think, for the Chicago Sky, considering that you can either try to win or try to rebuild, and they don't have a great path to rebuilding right now based on some of like what their pieces currently are and what the draft picks that they have, or more accurately don't have. So
Yeah.
you really need to try to win, which requires Kahleah. So big move for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so funny, but it's totally right. And I think, the Storm in the Sky. I know people were complaining that like, oh, we didn't get the drama of like the free agency part of it, but I think these two teams did what they needed to do, and it will definitely benefit them going into the offseason and into their future. Let's move on to the last two. The first one being Betnijah Laney. She signed an extension with the New York Liberty through the 2025 season. Cal, you have the numbers.
Yeah, this is from the next. It's 2 years, 180K, 185K in each of the 2 years, full protection, which is a little bit of a pay cut. We'll talk about this. I think she's probably not going to be the only one that has to take a little bit of a pay cut on this team if they want to keep it together. Obviously, we've seen other players do this as well. It's not unprecedented at all in this league. This current year, 2023, she's making just over 200,000, about 202. So the 180 range is a little bit of a pay cut for her, but I suspect that it's something that she's more than happy to do if she can stay on, somewhere that she loves playing, obviously, and also continue to play with superstars on a contender.
Yeah, and I think stability is the key word here, where if you look at Laney's career so far, it has been a little bit up and down. And I think, she's kind of reiterated this too in media. I think she's finally found a place that she has a lot of trust in New York, and that she feels safe and in a good environment. And they are an elite team right now. We'll see what they do in the playoffs this year. We're also going to get to that in a little bit too. But yeah, a big thing is going to be, how many pieces of this quote unquote super team can you actually keep once the offseason rolls around? I think, what happens in the postseason might determine some of that. So it's really, really imperative that the Liberty were able to work that out with her kind of being like the first dice to roll, or whatever the saying is. But no, I think she's really important to what the Liberty do. She's part of the original, like, this is what the potential of the Liberty could be before they signed all those big names. So I'm really happy that she continues to have a home in New York. I really love watching her. She's one of my favorite players in the W. So yeah, that was pretty cool. We'll move on quickly to our last one. Kayla McBride of the Minnesota Lynx also signed an extension. Before we get into her, Cal, hit us with her numbers.
Yeah, this is from the Next as well. A little bit higher numbers, 208K and 205K. Again, another 2-year deal, full protection.
Yeah. And, we look at the Minnesota Lynx where they made it to the playoffs this year. They're playing competitive again, but it's also kind of just like, what direction are they going in now too? So I think, signing her, K-Mac is a vet, re-signing her, I think is really good for them too. I'm very interested to see what their off season, not their offense. I mean, I guess sure you can work that into this conversation somehow too. But I'm very interested to see how their off season looks like as well, and kind of what they do in the postseason, but also what they look like next year, because they are also working towards a goal, especially making the playoffs. With the way the season started, there was that whole like, oh my God, are they tanking conversation? But they're not. They are not tanking. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my reactions. I'm just kind of like very intrigued about what this team is trying to do and what they're trying to work towards.
Yeah, definitely not tanking. And you're in a pretty good spot if you're Minnesota, I think, in terms of the future, because you have Kahleah just entering her prime, a franchise cornerstone you can build around, which is why you bring someone like Kayla McBride back, because you need to surround Fee with these pieces where she can win during her prime. Obviously, you have two really promising rookies, the best pair of rookies other than maybe Aaliyah Boston and Grace Berger, I think, in the league, in terms of Diamond Miller and Dorka Juhas, who've showed a lot of promise. So, and you got picks. So this is a team that can definitely build around Kahleah and get better. Obviously, they are already had probably a better year than maybe some people expected this year. And I think if you look at the next couple of years, if they play their cards right this offseason, it's only going to get better.
Yeah, so that's all super exciting. Curious to hear what you guys think about like which signing was most important and which team is going to benefit the most in the long term. So do let us know on social media. Let's move on to our playoffs preview, because we've arrived at the first round of the playoffs, which is super exciting. We'll go through each of the matchups. I'm going to start in the order that the games are being broadcasted. So we'll start with Lynx versus Sun. Game 1 is on Wednesday, September 13 at 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. I don't know the Canadian TV schedule yet for all the Canadians that listen to this pod, but I will be sure to post those on Twitter once I know. So make sure you head over there. But it is on ESPN2. Let's talk about the Sun versus Lynx. The Sun won the regular, so let's put some background context. They won the regular season 3-1 over the Lynx, and that one Lynx win that they had was very close. It was decided by 4 points. So I think, Cal, like you probably agree with me on this, that we're both kind of leaning towards the Connecticut Sun to win this, being the number 3 seed, being as solid as they have been this whole season. So what is the key to this matchup for the Connecticut Sun to get that win over the Lynx?
I think they need to pound the glass. I think, even without Bree Jones for the latter part of this season, they have a pretty big edge on the glass against this Minnesota Lynx team, who really, they've done some other things well this year, but is probably the worst Minnesota Lynx rebounding team since 2009, statistically, which was the last time they didn't have Sylvia Fowles or Rebecca Brunson, the two of the top 4 rebounders in the league history, which doesn't mean the Lynx are terrible. It just means they don't have 2 of the top 4 rebounders in league history for the first time or forever. They're vulnerable here, and the Sun can really take advantage of that. The Lynx aren't a great transition team, so you don't have to worry about staying back in transition defense as much. The Lynx are going to, especially in the playoffs, I think, probably slow it down a little bit more anyway. So that affords you opportunities to crash the glass on offense. And if you're the Sun, I think you have to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and then I guess like even bouncing off of that, because we'll talk about X factors as well too. Like my X factor for the Sun is actually like Olivia Nelson-Ododa. We talked about, the loss of Bree Jones this season, and she's been kind of brought in and been given more minutes. And, she had like the last game of the season was like, I think her best game this entire season. So that's incredibly good momentum to be going into the playoffs with. But yeah, like that's going to be like her size, her presence is really important on this team. So she's definitely like my X factor. Obviously, you want like the core group to perform well, but I think her presence is going to be super important. But on the Lynx side, I think for me, like the keys to the matchup is just going to be ball movement. I think, you know, the way that Connecticut likes to play, their defense is going to be really well. And, you know, you are going to be looking for Fee. I think that's like their main, obviously, like their MVP. And she is also my X factor for the Lynx. But I think, you know, just being able to keep that ball moving and have other options, it might give the Minnesota Lynx a chance. They have been really competitive this season at times. So, you know, I don't know if this will be a sweep. It might be a sweep, but we'll see. Do you have an X factor for the Lynx?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Kayla McBride, and obviously Nafisa Collier is the most important player. But if you look at the 4 games between these two teams, in the 3 losses, Kayla McBride was 3 for 11, 4 for 11, 1 for 3. In that one win, which was without Nafisa Collier, by the way, in that game, she was 7 for 10. She went off. Obviously, had more opportunities, but really stepped up in terms of shooting the ball as well. And I mean, you know what you're going to get out of Nafisa Collier. I think Nafisa Collier is going to show up no matter what happens. If Kayla McBride can be that Robin to Fee's Batman, that's what you need, especially offensively, if you're gonna pull the upset. And anytime you're looking at pulling an upset, you need threes to go in. So Kayla McBride's a player who can do that.
And I also would like to mention that game 2 will be on Sunday, September 17 at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. And if there's a game 3, there will be a game 3. But those are the first 2 games on the schedule on Wednesday and on Sunday. Lynx versus Sun. Make sure you tune in. All right, next matchup. Sky versus Aces. Game 1 is Wednesday, September 13 at 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Those Pacific times be killing us, but still, it's gonna be interesting. I don't know how you feel about this one, Cal. I think this one's probably going to be a sweep. The Aces won the season series over the Sky 3-0, and it was never really that close. And as a joke in my note, and I don't want to write off the Sky too much. Like, let me just preface this by saying I think they have a very talented roster. I think what they've done this season has been, like, we've seen flashes of how good they can be. But my keys to the matchup for them is like pray. Because it's a very, very, very hard first round match.
By the way.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking, and I was like, there's things that I could say, but the Aces are the Aces, and you know, as much as they've shown that they've been human in the last like month of the regular season, I think, and this comes with like my keys to the matchup for them, like the Aces are just themselves. I think this is pretty much a wrap, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, that kind of mirrors what I wrote down, jumping ahead a little bit for my key to the Aces, which was just show up, and play basketball. That's all you have to do. But I mean, in terms of the Sky, first off, I need to say that I've been wrong a lot about the Chicago Sky all year. Won more games than I thought they would. Every time I bet against them, I was wrong. They have, to me, like I'm very nervous to say anything like, oh, this is going to be an easy sweep, because it's going to end up somewhere. And again, going to look wrong. The Sky did keep it within 15 points in all 3 of those games, by the way. One of them was a huge blowout, and they sort of came back in the 4th quarter. But most teams had at least one 20-point loss to the Aces. Sky didn't. So give them credit where credit is due. I could see them keeping one of these 2 games semi-respectable, but this is a sweep. This is definitely a sweep. I just think that like the Aces have too much talent.
Yeah, we're gonna get at least one sweep, and I think it's a pretty safe bet that this series would be one sweep.
I think we'll get at least 2, but if there's one, it's one.
Yeah, if you had to guarantee, and it's okay. You know what? I'm done. I'm done predicting. Let me just move on.
Hey, you know the good thing though about predicting things is that we don't have any games Tuesday night that we're recording this. So no matter how wrong our predictions end up being, they won't be wrong by the time we release this pod, which is the first in the month that we've been doing this pod.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I was writing the show notes for this episode. I was like, thank goodness the playoffs start on Wednesday and Tuesday when I'm recording. There's nothing going on. But Sky versus Aces, game 1 is on Wednesday. Game 2 will be Sunday, September 17 at 3 p.m. Eastern on ABC. So if you want a more time zone friendly time, you can definitely catch game 2 if you sleep through game 1. I will be trying my best to stay up for it, but who knows what will happen. But let's move on to Mystics Liberty. And game 1 is Friday, September 15 at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. And in my notes, I wrote "Oh brother" for this one because I think there's been a lot of discourse about this matchup. The Mystics and the Liberty went 2-2 on the regular season, with the Mystics very famously taking the first and the last game of the season against this team. And I think it's provoked a lot of conversation about, oh, are the Liberty in trouble against the Washington Mystics just based on, how the regular season has gone. And I think, as much as you want to take away as much as you can from the last game of the season, I would also pump the brakes on that a little bit, because I think the Liberty this late in the season are a different team than the Liberty we saw on opening night that did get pummeled by the Washington Mystics. And I think, the playoffs are a different atmosphere, and we'll get into our keys of the matchup soon, but I don't know. I'm really iffy on saying that the Mystics are going to upset the Liberty in this one. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, that first matchup, we could throw it out the window because the Mystics were peak. They were healthy for about the only time all season. The Liberty were not. Obviously, JJ was coming off that injury. They were still kind of developing chemistry. The last matchup, just a week ago, we can maybe read a little bit more into because that's basically the current version of these two teams. But that being said, the Liberty led the league in 3-point percentage, and somehow the Mystics outshot them from 3 in all 4 games. At some point, water is going to find its level there. So that's not something that I would be extremely concerned about if I'm the Liberty. You do have to worry about if you do have another cold game, even if it's only one of those two, you may end up having to go on the road and win game 3 in Washington, which is going to be really tough. So I wouldn't necessarily go the same route that I did with the Aces in terms of I just think this series is over. But I definitely think that the regular season results that we see. And by the way, one of those 2 losses, the Mystics took to overtime, lost by 1. So
Yeah.
they were competitive even in the losses as well. But it's definitely something that I still I need to see it again from these Mystics in the playoffs.
Yeah, and like we'll go to keys of the matchup now, where for me, like I have 2. One is for the Mystics staying healthy. That's the biggest thing. I know Shakira Austin is still kind of doubtful with that hip injury, not really sure if she's in or out. I know there hasn't been any update as of when we're recording. That might change on Wednesday, not sure. And then my other key to the matchup, and kind of the reason why the Mystics were able to get that win against the Liberty at the end of the regular season, was Elena Delle Donne's defense on Stewie. It was very clearly not Stewie's night. She was having trouble with, the size, what EDD presents. And that's why my key to the matchup on the Liberty side is you don't always have to feed the ball to Stewie. If you're seeing that she's struggling, if you're seeing that it's maybe some of her shots aren't falling, there are other options on the team. And I'm not saying that like you shouldn't pass the ball to Stewie. You absolutely should, because when she makes the absurd shots, she makes the absurd shots. Like, she is Stewie for a reason. But I think that now, like, you have like JJ, like you have all these pieces who have developed over the season that can very well be a threat in this matchup against the Mystics. And I think as long as the Liberty don't revert to that, like, just get the ball to Stewie plan, I think they'll be able to come away with some more solid wins than they have over the Mystics this season.
Yeah, well, and one of those other options that they can go to aside from Stewie is my X factor. That's JJ. We talked a lot about how well she's been playing since the All Star break. But I was digging into some numbers here. The Liberty are 12-0, including the Commissioner's Cup, when JJ has a double double this year. They haven't lost yet. She has a double double.
I
The
like that
one
stat.
time
That's a great
out of
one.
those 4 times that they played the Mystics, they beat them in regulation. JJ had 27 and 11 in that game with 3 blocks. In the other 3 games, she averaged 8 and 6. So JJ shows up. This team's fine. This team should have no problem with the Mystics. That's who they need to go to, establish her down low, especially if Shakira Austin is out. Which again, we don't know as of this recording. That's only more opportunity, I think, to establish JJ's dominance down low. And she needs to come up big on the boards. And if you get peak JJ, I don't think the Mystics can win, even if they outshoot the Liberty again from 3. I think if we get the 8 and 6 JJ, then maybe the Mystics have a shot.
Yeah, no, I'm totally behind you on that. So game 1 is this Friday, the 15th. Game 2 will be Tuesday, September 19 at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. And make sure you stay tuned to her hoop stats throughout the week because there'll be lots of Mystics Liberty coverage heading your way. All right, let's move on to the last first round matchup, and that is the Atlanta Dream versus the Dallas Wings. Game 1 is set for Friday, September 15 at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. They played each other in the last game of the season, and the Wings won that game, and they won the entire season series 3-0. I know we've kind of talked about how we're like a little bit worried about the Dream, and I feel like that game also made me a little bit worried even more about the Dream. I'm not sure, and I don't think theoretically I don't think this matchup should be a sweep. However, if they play like that, then it might be. If the Wings just play like so solid against the Dream like they have been, and like the players aren't showing up or something's going on, it could be a sweep. But I would lean, and my gut is telling me that like the Dream could still take a game in this series. But like, what is your initial feelings about how this could go?
The Dream could take a game, but they got to shoot well. They got to get good looks.
Yeah.
They got to be patient in their offense and get good looks. Just not necessarily just take the first thing available if it's not there, and then they got to knock it down. The Dallas defense isn't necessarily anything to write home about this year. They've really made their living in transition and in offensive rebounding. They've only held 8 teams below 40%, but 3 of those 8 are the Atlanta Dream in the 3 matchups that they played against. So if you're going to shoot below 40%, if you're the Atlanta Dream, you're not going to win a game in this series. If you can get good looks and knock them down, I think you have a shot, especially if you can hold Arike down, because on the other end, like Arike, similar type of deal to JJ in terms of the Wings' success. Shout out to Justin Carter, by the way. Go subscribe to the Her Hoop Stats newsletter. He had a piece in there today and brought up some of these stats about their record when Arike shoots really well and when she doesn't. In terms of field goal percentage, I took it a little bit further with true shooting percentage because I'm the stats nerd. Wings 0-8 when Arike is below 40% true shooting. 15-3 when she's above 53%. So this one, a lot of series and a lot of games come down to shot making. That's how basketball works. But I think this one in particular, that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's kind of what I had in my notes for the Dream, where they should focus on the shooting and on the ball movement. I think you're probably going to see a lot of like driving and kicking it out to the 3 in this series, and the Dream. Yeah, if there's a time to catch fire with your shooting, now's the time. So yeah, hopefully we'll see what happens. My X factor on Atlanta's side is probably Alicia Gray. Big Al. I love using that as her nickname. I love, like, ever since I found out that was her nickname this year, I love saying Big Al. But I think, her ability to drive, but also just like kind of shoot from anywhere on the court. She's playing against her former team. I think, she'll have some extra fire too. She's my X factor for the Dream. And then on the wing side, I think I would go Satu to just, continue to play at the level that she's playing at, heavily being considered in the most improved conversation. But she's also been, in my opinion, the most valuable player of the Dallas Wings this year. So yeah, those are my 2 X factors. Who are your X factors, Cal?
Yeah, I love those. I actually have Arike for a lot of the reasons I just said on the wings.
Mm-hmm.
She needs to knock down shots. I do think Satu has been their most valuable player. And on the Dream side, I have Cheyenne Parker. I think the Wings, to me, are the best offensive rebounding team in the history of the WNBA. Obviously, their offensive rebounding numbers aren't quite as high as some of those teams from the late 90s and early 2000s. That's because that's how the game worked back then. People crashed the glass more. But compared to the era that they play in, I think they're the best. So Cheyenne Parker needs to come up big on the boards. And she has playoff experience. Out of the rotation, who Atlanta is going to put on the court, the healthy rotation, Cheyenne Parker won a title. Danielle Robinson's the only other player who's won a playoff series. So, and the Wings been in the playoffs last couple of years. It's really weird to me when I was sort of writing down these notes thinking, wait, is Dallas the more playoff experienced team in this matchup? Like, we've been talking about Dallas on the other end of this for the last couple of years, but all of a sudden, 3rd straight year in the playoffs, they bring in Natasha Howard, multi-time champ. Now they are the more playoff experienced team in this matchup with the Dream.
You're right. I didn't think about that. That's crazy.
It's weird, but Cheyenne Parker is the one exception to that. So I think that's going to be big.
Yeah, I typed out Cheyenne Parker, and then I figured I think Cal's going to talk about her, so I
You know
decided to
me.
put. I did know, yeah, we've done it long enough. If you look like in like the doc history of my notes, you'll see that I wrote Cheyenne Parker first. But no, I think she also has like one of the highest usage rates on the Dream right now, like out of their roster that they've been using. So yeah, she's going to be super important. Game 2 will be on Tuesday, September 19th at 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. So that's the schedule for all the first round matchups as well as our preview. Let us know which of these 4 matchups, how many of them are going to be a sweep, over under at like, I'll put it at like 1.5. How many sweeps are we getting if you were a betting person? If you're not a betting person, you just want to get some predictions in such so you can victory lap later. Totally fine with that. I've done my share of victory laps before. But let's move on to our last segment. Our award this week is going to be 6th player of the year. We're going to just talk about some candidates, some who we think should win it and some who we also think just should be in the conversation, might not necessarily win it, but deserve to have their flowers for what they've done for their respective teams this season. Cal, do you want to kind of start off first with the candidate that you're interested in?
Yeah, well, someone can I just get into my pick?
Yeah, go
Or are
ahead.
we gonna dangle it? Are we gonna dangle it? All right. Well, I didn't tell you who my pick was this time because I know you like to pick different than me. We're gonna see if we do. But I'm going with Alicia Clark in this one. I think when you look down the list at the other candidates who we're about to talk about, like if you're the Aces, would you trade Alicia Clark for any of them right now? Not this season. I think the answer is no. Right. I think Alicia Clark is the best basketball player this season, maybe not a few years from now, but this season out of any of those. She's a critical piece to this Aces team, which maybe it's not fair to, in the same way that people talk about the MVP and like, oh, this player has a bunch of stars around her and this player doesn't, so this player is more valuable. Like you could look at it that way for this award too, in terms of like, oh, the Aces bench has no one except for Alicia Clark. They're not deep at all. Some of these other benches are deeper. So Alicia Clark is a huge piece to this bench. And I don't know if that's fair to necessarily count that against other players who play on a deeper team. But I still just think what Alicia Clark has meant to this team on both sides of the ball, especially since Candace Parker got hurt. Obviously, like Jackie and Asia have improved some from last year, which is crazy to think Asia Wilson improved from an MVP season, but she did, I think. But I still think the biggest difference from last year's Aces team to this year's Aces team, which is better than the team that already won the championship last year, is Alicia Clark, bringing her in. And so to me, she's the 6th player of the year.
Yeah, I think right now she would also be my 6th player of the year. I think I have a close second if you want me to go a different direction, like you
Let's do
mentioned.
it.
I would probably go with Dana Evans of the Chicago Sky. I think, I've kind of been on her since the beginning of the season. And I don't know if I would call it bias, but I think the fact that the Sky and the Lynx were the 2 teams that came up here to Toronto to play in that game before the season, that was my first time sitting into a Chicago Sky practice. And just seeing the drills that they were doing for Dana, seeing how hard she worked, I think it gave me a little bit more of an inside perspective on what she is like as a player on both sides of the floor, both offense and defense. So, like, I could pull up her stats right now. I mean, out of all these 6th player of the year candidates that we've been talking about, she technically has the best points per game in terms of points per game. She has like 9 points per game average on the season. Alicia Clark has 6.7, just for reference. Alicia Clark has been shooting better, but I just think overall the impact of Dana Evans cannot be talked enough about on the Chicago Sky team, especially with all the different pieces that they have and all different skill sets. She could bring value to any team, honestly. And I've really loved what she's brought to the Chicago Sky. I think she should be in consideration for 6th player of the year. And I'd probably have her, honestly, like with the Sky being able to make the playoffs too, I'd probably have her as a close second right now to Alicia Clark, although Clark is my number 1 pick for this award.
Yeah, Dana Evans might be one of the biggest reasons that I've been wrong about the Sky a lot this year. She's been so impressive. So shout out to her. She's shown big improvement, obviously, and she will be a starter at some point in her career. But I like
Yeah.
that one though.
Yeah. We'll go through some other candidates just to have them in the conversation. Dejanay Carrington is somebody that has been in the conversation. And when I went to look back at how many games she played, she actually didn't miss as many as I thought she did. I don't know why in my head, like when she got injured, she played 32 games this year. So like she actually didn't really miss as many games as I thought in my head. But no, she was also good. I think, with Dejanay, she was kind of like the places that she would slot herself in did really well for what the Connecticut Sun needed on both ends of the floor. Like she could crash the glass and play good defense and also, come in and shoot the ball whenever she needed to, make plays. And she's been really impressive too. Definitely deserves to be in the conversation. We also have, on the Liberty, I think if I had to go with the sixth player of the year, it'd probably be Kayla Thornton. I think, and I didn't include her stats because the stats don't reflect the impact that she's had on this team. When the Liberty needs somebody to come in and kind of pick up the defense, they put in Kayla Thornton, and she has been so crucial to kind of keeping that team together and letting them go on runs and just to the overall flow of the basketball that they're playing. So she would be my sixth player of the year on the Liberty if I had to choose someone from that team. I've just been super impressed with her. She could also just come in and knock down a three whenever you like, if you need one. And so, yeah, no, she's for sure. And I know, Cal, you had somebody else that you wanted to include in the conversation that I totally did forget about before we recorded. Totally didn't forget.
I did. Well, no, I love Kayla Thornton. She's the glue, I think. And the Liberty have also maybe the most fun bench player, if we had that award, is Maureen Johannes, without question. But the other one I wanted to throw in there is Kalani Brown. She started 5 games, came off the bench most of the year. A big reason why I think the Wings are the best offensive rebounding team ever is that they basically get 40 minutes of that, because when Tierra McCowan goes to the bench, Kalani Brown comes in. And obviously it's sort of uncommon to see that type of size and that type of player in 2023 basketball is sort of a throwback, but it's worked for them this year. And Kalani Brown has really presented some problems for opposing teams, especially opposing teams when they get into those second units, I think, in terms of rebounding and just her size in the paint. So she's someone that I wanted to throw in there as well. I should have looked up the stats. I don't have them, but I want to say she leads bench players, eligible players for this awards, in rebounds per game. I could be wrong about that. I was unprepared. I'm not as prepared as Cree for these things. That's my bad.
I mean, like low-key forgot about her right until we recorded, even though I meant to put her in the notes. But no, it slipped my mind. But not to like compare it to like the men too, but like, this is just my weekly Raptor comparison. But like when the Raptors had Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka in 2019, and Nick Nurse just decided at one point during the 76ers series to just put both of them in at the same time instead of using them to replace each other. Like if LT did that with Tierra McCowan and Kalani Brown, I would lose my mind. And I totally 100% support it and back it up.
Let's see it. That game would hit 200 points if that happens, because neither team is going to be able to guard each other at that point.
That would be incredible. Just incredible entertainment, incredible everything. But no, I just want to add that as an aside. But yeah, those are kind of our candidates for sixth player of the year that we wanted to talk about. Both picked Alicia Clark. I think Dana Evans should definitely be there in consideration. Same goes for Dejanay Carrington too. Honestly, I think she should be up there as well. But yeah, I also wanted to give some love to Kayla Thornton and Kalani Brown and what they've, contributed to each of their teams this year. And with that, I think we're good to wrap this up. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I did want to give a shout out to, I kind of shout out something from her Hoop Stats every week, but I wanted to give a shout out to our photographer, Chris Poss. I think, the photos that he's done all year, you like kind of see it in some of our episodes. They're kind of incredible. And I'm excited to see more of his work throughout the playoffs with the Sun. I think he's based in Connecticut, if I'm not mistaken, just based on the pictures that I've seen.
I believe that is true. Yep.
Yes. So no, his work is incredible. Make sure you're going and following and see all his WNBA pictures. I really, really enjoy seeing them. So I just wanted to give him a quick shout out. You can find us on social media at Her Hoop Stats. Find myself on Twitter at Crina MM. You can find Cal on Twitter at CWetzel31. And make sure you tune in next Wednesday because we will be very deep in the playoffs by then. We're going to have more awards talk. We're going to tackle the MVP and MIP conversation. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Anything else you want to say before we wrap it up, Cal?
I love doing this. This is so fun. And I'm so excited for the playoffs, the awards, playoffs, contract extensions. We have so much going on right now. WNBA is in peak form. Everyone should be watching. Every game from here on out is on national TV. I don't know about you guys in Canada. I hope you get it. Every for United States,
Yeah,
it's all
like
national
it
TV.
should
So go
be.
watch.
So because it's the playoffs and they kind of do this in the last day of the season too, it should be on like the TSN and Sportsnet channels, you know, for the Canadian listeners that are either watching or listening to this. But yeah, like I said before, go to my Twitter. I'll be posting the TV schedule every single game day once I know. Because like for some reason they don't have those ahead of time. Like I only find out the day of the games. So yeah, I'll be sure to post all that so that you can find the games and make it be more accessible. But yeah, they should be more on our national TV too, which is pretty cool. All right. That's all from us. Thanks for going coast to coast with us, and we will see you next Wednesday.